Hello everyone, welcome to another Grimgar video. Today's video we are going to talk about the Mage Guild. For those of you who are not aware, every Monday or so I ask you guys on our community page to vote for what videos do I do next. And you guys voted for the Mage Guild! Thanks! Don't mind me, I'm a little salty because I have to go and look up a crap ton of stuff for the Mage Guild. Because the Mage Guild has probably the most information of all of the classes. There are just so many components to the Mage Guild that making a video about the entirety of it is very exhausting. Out of all the classes of Grimgar that I've broken down so far, this one's gonna take me the longest to make, based off of just pure amount of information, but there's not a lot of hard facts, I guess, for certain aspects of the Mage Guild. There's more of narrative implications for a lot of stuff the mages have to deal with and can do. Some of what I'm going to say is probably going to be kind of speculatory here and there. I'll let you know when it's speculatory. It's the class that probably is the most complicated, if I'm being honest. And yes, I am aware that I said the Dread Knights are the most complicated. I was wrong. I was very wrong. But like in past videos, I'm going to talk to you guys about the history of the Mage Guild, which there's realistically no big history. There's a lot of mages that have been around in history. There's no real backstory to the Mage Guild, like the Thief Guild or the Dread Knights Guild. It's kind of just a bunch of really fancy rich fuckers got together and made a guild and learned magic. This is one of the reasons why the Mage Guild is in the eastern side of Alterna, which is like the more fancy, pretty side of Alterna, essentially. And the guild itself is probably the best looking out of all the guilds. Honestly, kind of like a small castle. It's kind of unfair, actually. And this might be a bit of a hot take, but the Mage Guild in late levels could possibly be the most powerful out of all of the classes. And it's even hard to argue this when you see what happens to Shihuru in the light novel. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get to that when I get to it. But for now, let's talk about the tactics of the Mage Guild. The tactics of the Mage Guild is stay in the back and shoot spells. Depending on the spells that the mage actually has, they can either support their allies or do massive damage to their enemies. For example, Shadow Magic, which is mostly what Shihiro uses, is supposed to be more supportive. It's supposed to be more for supporting the front line and debuffing enemies. While Fire Magic is supposed to do long-lasting physical damage. And it can also be used to control space. Filling entire areas full of fire makes enemies move away pretty damn fast. Thunder Magic does a little bit of both, and is more meant for AoE. Ice Magic is supposed to do some damage, but overall slow down enemies. Due to the fact that mages have absolutely no actual melee skills whatsoever, a lot of what mages do is more or less more tactical based. Out of all the classes, I'd argue the mages are probably the most tactical when it comes to using their abilities. You need to plan when and where to actually use your spells and how to, especially since you only have a certain amount of spells you cast before you have to meditate and regen some energy. All mages can cast very basic spells. However, more experienced mages will use the power of elementals. Elementals are essentially these creatures that are in a different universe altogether. They're kind of in a universe that is next to ours, and they can be pulled from their universe to our universe. They can always be around us, but we can't see them. Essentially, what mages do is they channel the energy from the elementals and bring them forth into our reality. You can then turn the elementals into a projectile, a sleeping spell, a fireball, electric attack, whatever you want. The Mage Guild of Alterna will only teach you the most common elemental types. These types are Arv Magic or Fire Magic, Canaan Magic or the magic of ice, Falls or the magic of lightning, Darsh Magic or the magic of shadows, and then there's also non-elemental magics, like basically Magic Missile. To use magic, most mages have to actually draw sigils with their hands, staffs, or possibly swords, and use incantations. When you add else to any incantation, it actually powers it up. In higher level, more powerful incantations add more words to the incantation. Elementals also do not like metal. So if you're using a steel or iron sword, elemental will go nowhere near you. I should probably mention that I assume that the elementals are being turned into actual full-fledged spells. So for example, an elemental being pulled into our reality getting turned into a fireball is no longer really an elemental anymore. So if you get a fireball shot at you and you have steel or an iron shield, you can't just block it and hope that it'll disperse. That elemental is now just a full-on fireball, and it will not just get dispersed away just because you have iron or steel on you. I'm assuming this is how it works because technically if it didn't, most elementals wouldn't go anywhere near a mage if they're next to their fighter or paladin teammates. And the fact that fireballs and other spells don't seem to have any problem hitting any enemies that are covered in armor to begin with. So for mages that do use swords, they have to have special coatings on their swords that actually make it so the elementals will not get affected by the steel or iron. The mage from the Tokis has 2 broadswords that she uses, and she also starts using these swords to make incantation spells with the swords, which is really powerful. However, coating a sword is extremely expensive. It's heavily implied through the story that there are more spells in the world than just the ones you learn in Alterna. Adachi, Renji's mage, actually knows blood magic, and we've never seen any other mage in the entire story actually use blood magic besides him. And the Lich that you see in Volume 17 of Grimgar actually used multiple new forms of magic that looked like it was earth magic, possibly also mixing wind magic with it, and death magic. Each type of magic has something called mastery. The more you use its specific type of magic, like Darsh magic for example, the more your mastery goes up. The more you know of that type of magic, the faster your incantations are going to be and the more powerful the spells are going to be. So if you use, say, specifically Darsh magic like Shiharu does, eventually she won't actually need to use too many incantations to cast higher level spells. There is nothing stopping any mage from actually learning multiple forms of magic. For example, Shiharu actually learned shadow magic and lightning magic. And apparently in the Wikipedia it says he also learned ice magic, but I don't recall any time her ever actually using any form of ice magic. But hey, sure, Wikipedia. Let me know if I'm wrong or Wikipedia is wrong in the comments. Eventually, if someone actually learns enough about a specific type of magic, you can actually drop all forms of magic and master that one to such an extent that you can learn what's called true magic. True magic is essentially you using the elemental directly. And you can summon it to reality and use it in very special ways without having to draw magic sigils or say any magical words. For example, Shiharu learned to bring out her dark, which is essentially her own little dark avatar, which originally started out as a small little starfish looking thing, and eventually turned into a giant octopus of death. Funny enough, in Grimgar, as much as I keep making D&D comparisons to Grimgar, they don't actually have spell slots. They have what is known as MP, which I'm sure if anybody's ever played an RPG, you know exactly what MP is, and yes, that is exactly what it is. And while we don't actually get to see how much MP anybody exactly has, they are aware of their MP by how their body feels, essentially. The less MP they have, the less conscious they basically get. There are a shit ton of members in the Mage Guild, starting with Shiharu, Adachi, Musuki, basically the mage lady that was in Mary's party, I believe, Memori, Masakura, which I don't actually know who that is. I feel like I should know who that is. Mamahina, by the way, she's more of a mage monk multi-class if I'm being completely honest, and Yashuma. There are 2 former members that we are aware of from the Mage Guild. One is Anna, and no Wikipedia, I will not call her Anna-san. Go fuck yourself.
Denji, お前も好きだったろ?
She does not deserve the sun. And Gosh. And now we're gonna talk about equipment. Basically, they use robes and sticks. Alright, fine, they're staffs, but still, they're sticks. Like, honestly, if you're a mage and you eventually get strong enough to not need your staff, that staff is literally just a stick. Like, yeah, it looks nice. You can bean someone in the head with it, but they're basically just sticks. We've been shown that you don't actually need to use the staff to actually write signs in the air. You could just use your hand or a sword. Or, if you really need, like, a wooden type object, you can just literally pick up an actual stick and not need to carry a giant staff around. Yeah, you can bean someone in the head, but like, just a fucking fireball. Also, they get fun little hats. I actually really like their hats. They're really cute. I like the hats. And like I've said before, elementals hate metal, so they can't wear any form of armor unless you want to pay like an arm and a leg to get it coated properly, which is for a whole armor set. That sounds gonna cost you like a house. But one thing I find really weird about the whole mage clothes is why don't you guys just wear leather armor? My personal rationale for this is that they wear loose-fitting robes so they have more comfort in their body, so there's nothing that actually distracts them from casting a spell. So, say you're trying to cast a spell, but your leather armor and your crotch really rides up. That's gonna distract you. So, maybe wearing robes makes it easier. I don't know. Now for skills and abilities! Magic Missile, the first most basic spell that any kind of mage actually learns. Every single mage has to learn this spell. At level 1 is a fist-sized ball that you shoot at your enemies. And yes, I am aware that in the anime they made this spell much bigger. And also in the manga they made it bigger too. Chihiro literally just blasted a pretty big section of the area with a mist magic missile. This spell hits with the force of an adult human punching someone. And in higher levels, if you put more energy into it, it can get really, really big. Also, fun fact, you can shoot a magic missile from your palm point blank, which unfortunately Hadahiro has learned when he tried fighting Jesse. The enchantment is Mark M. Park. Next spell on the list is Shadow Beat, a spell that basically shoots like a magic missile at people, except it's covered in shadows and actually disables the enemy. It's basically a spell that stuns people. The spell's incantation is Rek Ril Ek Ven Dos. Phantom Sleep or Sleepy Shadow. Sleepy Shadow is essentially a spell that shoots towards their enemies. If it makes contact, the elemental goes into the mouth, ears, and nose of the enemy and puts them to sleep. If the enemy is aware of what is happening, it is much harder to put them to sleep. However, if you catch them off guard, it almost guarantees them going to sleep. Enemies can be awoken by having their allies just come up to them, just like tap them, slap them, do whatever to wake them up. The incantation for this is Dom Rek Ek Kron Das. Shadow Bond. It's a spell that immobilizes your enemies. It only lasts up to 25 seconds, but it can get multiple enemies at once. Unfortunately, enemies with more strength can get out of this spell very quickly. The incantation for this spell is Ril Ek Nen Das. Shadow Complex is a long-range spell that if it hits the enemy, it bewilders them. Essentially, it basically gives them a really bad mental debuff. It even works on really strong-willed enemies. The incantation for this is Rel Ek Prom Dash. Suriko or Hot Wind is what it sounds like. It shoots really hot wind towards your enemies. The incantation for this is Derm Hel En Van Olv. Firewall. Oh, this is a good one. Or Wall of Fire. Thanks, Wikipedia. It's a defensive spell that summons multiple pillars of fire in the way of their enemies, or can even summon them around to hold them in place. Or if you want to be a real dick about it, which is what I would do, summon them directly under your enemies. The enchantment for this spell is Derm Hel M Rig Alv. Blood Frenzy or Freezing Blood is a spell that directly freezes your enemy's blood and holds them in place. The incantation for this one is Jiru Mia Grum Fel Koron. My dyslexic brain hurts a lot from that last one. Ice Globe is basically just an ice magic missile. The incantation for this spell is Jiru Mia Grum Tara Koron. This next spell is called just Lightning. It summons a lightning bolt from the sky, striking the enemy. The incantation for this spell is Jess Yin Stark from Darth. Thunderstorm is literally just a powered-up version of lightning. It's multiple lightning strikes on one area. Shiro used this back in the light novel early on, and it fucks. It hits hard. The incantation for this one is Jess Yin Snark Kark from Dark. God, my brain. Shadow Armor is basically the Grimgar equivalent of Mage Armor, except in Grimgar it's a lot weaker, because of course it is, thanks Grimgar. It's essentially a magical armor that surrounds the mage and makes it so it can take one single hit for the mage. The incantation for this one is Rel Ek Dem Brem Darsh. Shadow Mist is an upgraded version of Sleepy Shadow. It induces an immensely powerful sleeping spell on multiple targets. It is still less effective if the enemies are aware of what is happening, however. The incantation for this one is Rel Ek El Krom Darsh. Shadow Echo is an upgraded version of Shadow Beat. It hits a lot harder and does a lot more stun damage to your enemies, and holds them in place for a little longer. The incantation for this one is Rel Ek El Zen Darsh. I'm getting better at these. Fireball! And it's, surprise, a fireball! Just like Magic Missile, the size of this fireball can vary depending on how much energy you put into it. The incantation for this one is Dem Hel En Ig Arv. Fire Pillar. It's a pillar of fire that is very powerful, and if you summon this under a person, it can fuck someone up. The incantation for this one is Del Hel M Rig Arv. Blast is a very, 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 very powerful fire blast. The explosion comes from where the person is targeting, not from the staff or from the mage itself. Wherever the blast the person wants to come from is where it is going to explode. It's more powerful than Fire Pillar and Fireball. I was able to make a pretty big hole in the floor, about 1.5 meters wide. The incantation for this one is Delm Hel El Bark Zen Darsh. Shadow Pond is an upgraded version of Shadow Bond. It is much more powerful and lasts longer, and paralyzes multiple enemies if they are close to each other. The incantation for this one is Rel Ek El Numerum Darsh. And fine, fuck. And now for non-elemental magics, and these all have absolutely not a single name to any of them. Miho and Gosh used this one spell that apparently can create a loud, high-pitched sound that is able to blow up a 8-meter tall giant's head clean off. I'll talk about how she's able to use this spell in the end section of the actual video, but essentially her incantation starts with Den, He, Lu, En, Bu, Zero, Ruv, Dog, No, Meteor, Null, We. Sha, Van. Once Miho is about done with her incantation, Gosh takes over and does his incantation. Ni, Vi, Lu, Xia, Rosh, Fen, Den, Gen, Ji, Hai, Neo, Shi, Kin, Du, Hai. Fuck! This spell requires 2 mages. Both mages have to use elemental magic that causes the wind to flow in 2 different directions. Both these spells force a giant hurricane to appear and causes massive damage to the surrounding area. It was so strong that it actually crushed a hydra. This next spell was done by Miho. Essentially, the spell creates a giant purple object that could be fire or electricity and causes the enemy that it's targeting to get cut into pieces. This next spell was also used by Miho. The spell creates a blackish green light. Each time the light flashed, it caused the enemy to get pierced by something. Miko used another spell. This spell creates a pink object that hits the target. When this pink object touches an enemy, it emits a very loud and sudden sound. It grows in size and erases or melts the part of the enemy or just the enemy entirely. Gosh used this next one, and it just describes as a spell that creates a giant explosion. That's it. It could have just been blast, Wikipedia, thanks. And those are all the spells that we're aware of from the light novel. Before we continue this section, I would like to remind you all that I'm very dyslexic and my eyes are in so much pain right now from reading these fucking spells. Please, for me, hit the like button and subscribe. I love you. Ugh. And finally, we're at the last section of the video. And my fun fact section is going to be dedicated to true magic because true magic's fucked. True magic essentially makes it so you bring the elemental forth into reality and make it so the elemental is in our reality. It doesn't turn into an actual spell. It just is an elemental brought into our world. Now, Shihiro is the only one that we know besides her master that actually has true magic. Her true magic is called Dark. Dark is ridiculous. Dark can utilize all of the spells that Shihiro has learned from learning Darsh magic without needing to say an incantation or drawing a sign whatsoever. It can phase through people. It can block out areas with darkness by having dark turned into a giant mist. It can protect Shihiro by turning it into armor. It can help her fly by having her grab onto it while it levitates. It can turn into a giant magic missile that is strong enough to cause a dragon to stay still because of how incredibly bad the pain is. Dark can go through multiple different objects and people and enemies at once. At one point, it went through multiple goblins and killed all of them. I'm assuming it can also put them to sleep, and it can change its size at will. In volume 17 of Grimgar, Shihiro was dropped from the sky, and she turned Dark into a giant octopus of death, and she took out an entire army by herself and technically part of another army, kind of by accident, sort of. Mostly because they were in the way, and Shihiro is hands down the most powerful person in Haruhiro's party. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video of me also kind of tormenting myself because I had to read all of those spells and my brain hurts like a motherfucker, please hit the like button, share. Please check out my Twitch and help me get to 500 followers because I need to get that shit done because I want to get to 500 so badly. By the way, the community tab area is my brain just died all at once. My apologies. My head hurts now so badly. The community tab section of our YouTube channel should have the next poll up for all of you to go vote. Please go do that.